Good afternoon. I think we can start. It's already 3 minutes past 10. Okay, so can I get thumbs up that you can hear me well? I had issues recently with Zoom. Can you guys hear me? Jesse, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you. I was just sitting in silence, so I wasn't sure. Okay, so I think today we had one agenda item. I wanted to talk about how we manage dependency version of GitOps engine. And the reason is, so actually, Kate prepared a document recently because he made a change in GitOps engine, and he was wondering how to actually start using the new change in Argo CD. And I realized that we don't really, we have not decided how exactly we should do it. And okay, so maybe let's talk about that. And after this is done, I think the rest of this meeting is just office hours. So we'll need to spend time answering questions. Okay, so let me share my screen just to clarify what I'm talking about. So as you might know, Argo CD uses GitOps engine to perform Kubernetes resource diffing and syncing. And we did that so someone else could use GitOps engine to implement GitOps. And like for the maybe last several months, Argo CD was the only user of the repository. And that's why we didn't really care much about official releases of GitOps engine. It was just a library which Argo CD uses. And that's why right now, if you want to upgrade version of GitOps engine, you're supposed to specify commit SHA, and that document describes the procedure. So basically, you would have to do you would have to execute the following command: go get and then GitOps engine repo name and commit SHA. And typically, that commit SHA is just the most recent commit of a master branch in GitOps engine. And that works for us because it's it's very casual. You don't need to have any release. You can just update the version, but it doesn't work for two reasons. So one is sometimes we have to cherry pick changes. So imagine if we made a release of Argo CD, and then we have like 5 changes in GitOps engine, and then we find a bug in Argo CD. And to fix that bug, we need to make a single change in GitOps engine. And at this point, it's impossible because unless we have release branches, we would have to pull all 5 changes plus the bug fix into Argo CD. So that's one problem. And the second is we actually have a user now. Apparently, GitLab uses GitOps engine to implement GitOps agent. That's how they call the project. And it just looks bad because now because we don't have official release tags, they use commit SHA. And yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk about. And I feel like one obvious proposal is to start releasing, start creating release tags, and maybe we need to offline somehow figure out release criteria. And that means a little bit of overhead for us because we need to, do this procedure, but it's definitely an approval. Yeah.
Good question. Are folks from GitLab on this call by any chance?
No, I don't.
It would be nice to get some of the contributors there.
I know that it's hard to get them on the call is because, team is, I think, is even more distributed than Red Hat team. And they typically, at least Mikhail, usually, I think Mikhail is a most active contributor from GitLab. I think he usually offline at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can, we can kind of just start discussion now and then, keep it offline and involve him and he can give his comments.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So I guess, so this is, I'm looking, for kind of knowledge if anyone else knows better way to solve the problem. And one proposal from my side is to just, start creating release branches and release tags And procedure is kind of simple. So we keep making changes. As soon as we think we have enough, changes are stable, we create release branch, and then a release tag, and then we use that release tag from Argo CD. And if we need to make kind of hotfix, like if we need a patch release, it's easy. We make changes in master, cherry pick it back to a release branch, create release tag, and then update release tag in Argo CD. So it's, I think, the most straightforward way. The disadvantage is we have to do that now instead of just using commit share.
Right. I mean, is the GitOps engine being used as a library only today?
Yes, it's just a library.
In both cases, right? Yeah, got it. Yeah, I mean, then to a fair extent, I would say, I think the main reason it's being working as is right now is because, let's say, we have a fix that we need, and that's in GitOps engine. You just vendor that specific SHA in your go.mode, and you're good to go. So I know in the long term we should have. It's nice to have those releases, but then it comes with an overhead. But right now, what are the issues you're seeing in general with that approach between Argo CD and GitLab agent?
It doesn't hurt us right now. Because GitOps engine is more or less stable. We just don't have such situation. I had to create release branch only once. There was the case where we kind of created Argo CD release, and then we needed a fix. So I had to kind of go back in the history, pick commit which was used in Argo CD, create release branch, and then cherry pick another commit into that release branch. But that was kind of one of.
Yeah, I mean, my main, again, that's not a concern. That's something that we have to do, is that when you go into the whole release model of things, the cherry picking becomes a fairly common thing. I'm not saying we should not do that because of that reason, but that's an overhead in general. In general, I would say the thing that we should consider is the moment we go into a cycle of making releases, we have to either define a time-based thing, like every month. If there are a reasonable number of changes that go in, we just do a release of the library. It's just a lot easier that way to maintain, or we'll have to probably define milestones there as well, that when these changes go in, we'll do a release. Because I don't assume there is a roadmap for making huge breaking changes in the GitOps engine, right? It's just going on fine.
Mostly, I feel most of the changes are going to be related to upgrading version of Kubernetes client and then fixing some backward incompatibility.
So Alex, so I feel like there may be a middle ground. So right now it's it's easy in terms of, as a developer, you just make the change in GitOps engine, push to master, and then update the commit SHA in the Go mod of Argo CD. And so that, and basically I think what I'm hearing is that you have, with the kind of a formal release model, it's a little more overhead. So basically you have to tag it and semantically version it, and then in an Argo CD you update it with the semantic version. But which requires like more, I guess, release.
My headphones got disconnected. Let me try to fix it.
Okay.
Do you want to check if you can hear us now?
Now I can hear you. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. So the original model was that we just we could only easily just push to the master of GitOps engine, and then just update the commit SHA of Argo CD, and then you're basically got the fix. With the proposed model is a little more overhead. You have to push to master, tag, and I guess release it, and then we would choose the semantic version of that, and then Argo CD.
Yeah, that's right.
But also we would also have release branches for, say, release at a minor release level, right?
Yeah.
So I think the thing that you really want out of all of this is just the release branch, because that's the point in time where you don't want the risk of the upstream changes, but you want the
Actually, I mean, you're right. Release tags. I feel like I wanted to have release tags because Golang like it so much, but
okay.
you still can use just release branch. You know, you can just. I'm pretty sure you can do go get, and then a repo
Yeah.
version add release branch.
Right. So that's actually where I was heading. If that turns out to be too much overhead, we could do basically do by branch instead of tag. Or we branch and we continue doing with commit shop, but then we just start using branches for the points in time where we need the a stable, I guess, stable release.
I think it will work for Argo CD, for developers because it's not much overhead, and then still, and I guess I would only ask what GitLab team.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think they
So
might.
I think,
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah, I think so. I think one other point that we need to consider about going for releases versus continuing to use commit SHA is that if we go for commit SHA, like let's say we continue going for commit SHAs forever, I think then the reasonable expectation should be that the library behaves like a SaaS, which means every commit you make to master should be usable, should be stable. There's no question on that. But if you go into, let's say, a release or tag or branch model, then you're effectively saying that master may not be the most stable, wait for the next release to get these changes in a more stable way. Like that's the general expectation we're setting from the user, which from a GitOps project level might be easier, which means you can take riskier changes in. But the risk of that is you take too many riskier changes in, and the end you figure out there's a steep work to stabilize that and release it. Whereas, like I said, if it's a typical SaaS model where you're pushing to production like 15 times a day, and if I had to map that to a library model, which means that if a change goes into master, then you're not putting out any extra notice saying that do not use master, but use something from 10 days back because that is more stable. Like the stability expectation should be high for every state of master. If that's not something that we want to do, that should be our driving force towards moving to a release-based model, the way I think it is. Because then the whole overhead makes sense. What do you think, Jesse, Alex?
I think I'm pretty sure what we're trying to do right now is, every commit to master keeps it stable pretty much. It's just because GitOps engine, we are not working on any breaking changes. So it's naturally easy to enforce it.
Yeah, I mean, if we can ask GitLab and if we can ask ourselves that we have extreme amount of PR testing to say whatever we are doing does not break a consumer, again, because we might not have considered all use cases, as simple as that.
Oh, yeah.
So if we can ensure that we have extreme amounts of testing per PR to say that if the PR passes means that this is production ready, then like we can continue with the current model with the Git SHA. But then that's the thing that we have to do to reasonably say that it's going to remain stable, because we know that our change is not innocently like our innocent change is not breaking something on the GitLab side. Now, again, can we take in every vendor's tests in? We don't know, but at least an Argo CD and a non-Argo CD project consuming this library is a good enough diverse test case, I would say.
What if we just follow convention that when we release Argo CD, we make sure we use release branch of GitOps engine. During development, we just keep doing what we're doing, just use master, because it might happen again. Like we might have a bug which we need to cherry pick, and if you don't have a branch, you cannot cherry pick.
Yeah.
So it's basically that would only affect release process. You just have to do one more, create release branch every release once, and it's not a big commitment, I think.
Well, I mean, it's not. It's just that from a GitLab perspective, I mean, let's say if I was GitLab, I might still pose you a question that, hey, this fix is available in 1.8. Is there a reason why we can't put it in 1.7 or 1.6 because we don't want to move beyond that? Now, those are good questions. Now, the point is, if you do have a release, those questions arise. If you do not have releases, those questions don't arise at all. Now, we just have to be ready for that. Like, if there is another consumer, and that could be Argo CD itself. Argo CD itself might say, hey, there are good reasons for us to not go to a different version of GitOps engine. Can we cherry pick a commit and put it in an older release? So we just have to be okay with that, I would say.
Yeah, so, okay, I think I'm going to just create a bug, issue in GitOps engine and then describe 3 options, do nothing, do the most extreme one, create release tags and release branches, and then middle ground, create release, what Jesse proposed, and then ask Mikhail to commit and everyone to comment on it.
And just a quick question from a GitLab perspective, how often do they take from GitOps engine library?
Because they're actively developing, I think I feel like they are most active contributors right now in engine, so they're pretty much using master always. But because I think it's going to change, and I brought it up because for them it's going to be, I guess, concern soon. They will be like, oh, why do we keep using commit-sha?
Got it.
Yeah. I think ultimately it's long term. I think as we also gain more people are depending on it, they're gonna want the release, the standard release model. So probably what will need to happen is we just make it super convenient to cut releases and have a easier experience for us to release very frequently, and it's
and might also set up some guidelines as to what defines whether a commit should go back to a cherry picked into an older release or not. I think if you can set up those guidelines, and the expectations would be clear up front when you're starting to use the library.
Yeah, that to me it makes sense to kind of use the Argo CD release as a good base of kind of like how Kubernetes staging libraries are all kind of following every Kubernetes release. Like every time there's a minor a .x Kubernetes release, they kind of also branch out all of it's like Go client and all the other stuff.
The container runtime, right? So I think the container runtime, like the Creo 1.x works with Kubernetes 1.x. Like they always ensure that they keep doing that. So if folks are okay with it, then when I say folks, I mean the general community is okay with it, then we can say this follows the Argo CD release process, and that's fine. Unless somebody complains, we go with that. Sounds good.
Okay, I think that's clear. And there was no other topics for today's meeting, and I was hoping, to answer questions. Okay, sorry, my bad. And right in the beginning of meeting, Alex Collins said he wants to talk about contributing to workflows. Alex.
Thanks, Alex M. Any other Alexes in here? No, it's not. It's
just a couple of them.
There's a couple of them. It's good to hear. We're a gang. I joke, but me and Alex have it's a nightmare for 2 Alex. I once sat next to 3 Alexes in an office. We don't really do that anymore, do we? Anyway, let's move on. So people have been asking a bit about contributing to Argo workflows, and we're always very keen for people to get involved in contributing to the project, big or small. So I thought I'd just kind of give a few pointers to people who were interested in doing a bit of contribution to Argo workflows. And I think probably broadly the same will apply to Argo events and potentially to the other Argo projects as well, the Argo projects. So there are loads of really good ways to provide feedback, and you don't necessarily need to make a code contribution to make a valuable bit of feedback. So some really good ways to start out contributing are looking at the documentation. So we produce a lot of documentation. Obviously, it's hard to produce all the right kinds of documentation that everybody needs for it. So a really good way to start is to just have a look at the documentation. If you find an issue, raise a pull request. And we get many pull requests related to documentation. I'd probably say about a quarter of all the pull requests are related to either fixing an error in the documentation or writing some new documentation. A code contribution issue is a great kind of next step for anybody wanting to get involved. And the best way to find out where we're looking for code contributions is to have a look for help wanted issues. And there's a few ways to slice and dice these help wanted issues. You can see we've got about 20 open at the moment. We also have a lot that are labeled with a good first issue as well. So these are actually just the 20 that are labeled with good first issue. If you want a more advanced one, you can remove that good first issue to find some more kind of challenging ones. These are really good because, you know, we've curated the list of good first issues. And if something's a good first issue and help wanted, it probably means that the core team is not planning on working on that particular issue. So if that's something that's of interest to you, some feature that you want and it's marked with help wanted, that's a really good one for you to get involved with. If you want to kind of slice and dice these again, we encourage people to give thumbs ups to issues that are most important to them. And that gives you kind of another viewpoint on all these issues. And you can see there's another great set of issues here as well. We often end up looking at some of these. So this one here, for example, is being looked at and being developed. This artifact garbage collection is another really good example of a feature that would come up. We often have lots of kind of UI related features in here as well. And this one, in fact, if you want to look at me on this one, I'm particularly keen to understand how we can make it safer to run workflows. Okay, so just going back to the page there. So you can have a look at those. We also have an Argo Dev Slack channel for anybody who's a developer on Argo. Any of the Argo projects, you can come and work in there. They all developed in a common tool stack of Golang, React, JavaScript, some Makefiles and some shell scripts and protobuf files. So it's a common stack and you can get a lot of help in there. We get a lot of people asking questions and answering questions there as well. Then we've got, if you're going to be working on the code bases, there's 3 other things that are probably worthwhile taking a look at. This is the running locally guide that shows you how to start up Argo workflows on your local machine and get the user interface running on localhost port 2746 and how to work with those codes. We have a test policy. It's mentioned explicitly here, mostly because it's a CNCF requirement to have a test policy. But it's really important. We get a lot of pull requests that don't come with unit or E2E tests, and then we can't really accept those because we know that, you know, every pull request, every code change, every line of code that somebody submits is likely to have a bug in it. There's no software engineer in the whole world, not even Linus, who's, you know, is making code changes and not introducing bugs with them. And that, you know, all other things being equal, I think every 10 lines of code you write a one bug. And that's why testing is so important. And we also have a video, a 90-minute video on YouTube that basically walks you through the process of getting up to speed with contribution. In fact, if you go through that workshop, you'll end up making a small pull request yourself with a code change that walks you through the whole process. A couple of other kind of really good resources I would recommend to people are the Tour of Go, which is basically, you know, if you can write code in Python or Java, you'll be able to write Go in about 2 hours of reading this tutorial. I think I did it my first day when I joined the team, and I was able to make code commits in that day. You know, started at 9 AM on my first day on the team, and, you know, 11 AM I was able to make code commits. That's really good. And obviously there's really good React tutorials as well. React. Just Google it. Just Google React tutorials. That's all you need to do. There we go. And there's a great React tutorial we can go through as well about that. Okay, so I just wanted to cover off all those things, the kind of issues, how you can search those issues, where you can get help, how you can run Argo workflows on your local machine if you want to develop or test something. That's all I really have to share. Does anybody have any questions about that or anything they'd like to ask?
This does look like a stack similar to Argo CD in general, right?
Yes, it is the same. It's basically the same software stack.
Right, got it.
With less Git and less Helm.
Of course. And you never know. Some folks might have to encounter workflows with that, though.
Yeah. No, you're quite right. You're quite right. Less, but not zero.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Thank you.
Got a question. Just curious, how any components are being shared between workflow and like other product like Argo CD? Are they any like common stuff? The UI looks similar. For sure.
Yes. Yeah. So we have a shared UI library with a load of graphics and colors and so forth. I think Alex was involved with writing that originally. So that's on the user interface side, and we use things like Webpack and React, which are really common tools. On the Go side, there are a couple of different shared libraries that we use. So there's an Argo PKG library, which contains kind of loads of utility functions around it. But also there are things like, it's all Kubernetes cloud native. So we all use the Kubernetes Go client, for example. It's the core to everything we do.
Right, okay.
Alex is just sharing those in the chat channel now.
Two repositories, and I guess in both cases we don't really have any releasing process. We keep trying to use master in both projects.
Or main, as it's called now.
Or main.
If you create a new project, which is main.
And I guess the release cycle are dependent too, right? I guess they are between.
Every time there is changes are not happening very frequently, and I think we every time we make a change, we're trying to immediately update both Argo workflows and Argo CD, just to make sure nothing is broken. We avoid surprises. Just like recently, Alexei made a change in PKG, and then he upgraded Argo CD. Just so later on we won't be surprised by the change. So it's kind of two teams trying to be nice with each other. Every time we need a change, we make a change in thread library, upgrade ourselves, and the peer.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have one. Is this meeting the right place to try and get some context on specific Argo CD issues that someone might be working on?
Yes, I think it's, yeah. So we still have like 30 minutes. I guess that's the perfect time right now.
Yeah, so I think, Jaideep, before we get into that, I just want to ensure if anybody has questions on Argo workflows, which Alex just said, just give a few minutes for that. If not, awesome. Thank you, Alex, for that. Jaideep, you can go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks. I just pasted the link to the issue that I was looking at a little while ago. I had some questions around trying to reproduce it in general, some contextual questions around else. So basically, this issue talks about being able to customize the URL that is hit when someone tries to log out of Argo CD. And I was trying to reproduce it locally, but I wasn't having a lot of luck because I wasn't able to get the login logout behavior sort of duplicated locally. I tried to use the secrets and stuff that are in the test manifest, and that works like in the CLI. But then when I try to do that with the UI, it gets me past the login screen, but it doesn't actually log me in. So I'm just kind of wondering.
I feel like there are two things. So first is if you use the Gorman commands or make start command to start Argo CD, it basically starts Argo CD with off disabled. And that's why I think you would never see logout button, because if kind of authentication is disabled, you just get full access. and you still considered not logged in. So to reproduce it, you would need to make a change, I think, in routes file in Argo CD repository. And if you look for disable off flag, basically it's set to true. And if you remove that flag, then you can start API server with enabled authentication. And maybe that, okay, and I didn't ask you, like, how did you start API server locally?
Yeah, I've just been doing make start. Like,
Yeah, so I think in this case, yeah, you would never see logout button. So first thing, I think you need to just disable that flag, and then you have to log in. And typically username would be admin and password is your host name, like literally host name of your machine. Yeah, and then in this case, as soon as you log in, you will see a logout button. And I'm pretty sure, so logout button, all it does, it just it basically redirects browser to /API/logout, session logout URL. And that logout just clean Argo CD cookie and redirects user back to login. And I think that's what people want to customize. They want to, instead of redirecting to Argo CD login page, we need a setting to redirect to some maybe SSO provider logout URL.
so so I know this is probably going to be used by admins who are configuring Argo CD for their setup. So then how should they be able to input like custom URL? Should that be something they take through the UI, just like a new field or something in the UI, or some other way they can be setting that in?
I'm pretty sure like all this type of settings right now, we just tell to admins, make a change in config map, in Argo CD config map. And most of admins, they use kind of declarative way of managing these settings. So they usually, they use Argo CD to manage itself. So it's totally fine to just introduce a new setting in config map and assume people can edit it,
Okay, got it. And to test it, I can still use, like, if I'm applying the manifest under the test folder that I think just have password as password, that would still work to be able to log in, right?
Yes, yeah. But okay, and one thing is that it's only related, it only makes sense for SSO. So the setting have to take place if you use SSO. So like if you, so we need to keep in mind that Argo CD kind of supports two modes. You can either use local account to log in into Argo CD like admin. And then if admin says log out me, it doesn't make sense to redirect him to SSO, I think, because it's, okay. And basically when you execute logout method, you have a JWT token, and JWT token explicitly has issuer, which can be either Argo CD or SSO. And we need to check, if cookie was created by SSO and user wants to log out, that means we need to log him out from Argo CD and redirect him to logout URL of SSO provider. So that new setting, I think it has to be explicitly, like Octa logout URL or, yeah, so it has to be related to SSO.
Okay, got it.
I guess we need to just have it, reflect SSO in the name somewhere. We need to say that this is SSO logout URL. And if it's set, then when SSO user wants to log out, we redirect user to that logout URL. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And I guess if you want to configure SSO, I recommend to just use GitHub. I think it was the simplest one to configure. That's what I always use locally. I just run dex locally, and I use, there is an example so there is a sample argo cd cm.yaml file, which is, argo cd config map, and it has example of dex configured with GitHub, and that kind of, I think, simplest one to use.
Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you so much.
Quick question, Alex and Jesse in general. So from the current milestone that we have, is that fairly on a path to be done soon, such that the next one could start, the next one can be populated? I was just wondering.
As far as I know, I think we have several PRs open, and when we close them, we will, kind of percentage of completed task will improve. And I know that we have not even started working on one kind of big task. It was about repo server scaling, and we kind of, so I'm kind of, it's not, I feel like we maybe 50% complete.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're asking how far are we along with the V1.8 milestone?
Yeah, so I was going through the issues. I was actually thinking of picking up something to work on next week or the week after.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was seeing a bunch of them already had a PR open with it. So I know the 46% doesn't reflect exactly that, because a bunch of PRs are in there. They're just reviewed and taken in. So I think from what you're saying, that means there are a couple of big ticket items that we need to pick up, without which it makes no sense to start with the next milestone issue grooming as well.
Yeah, I think the goal of that milestone was to finally, improve scalability and make it possible to have as many applications as needed. And I think we worked on controller sharding and then a bunch of enhancements for repo server. Controller sharding, we need to finish reviewing PR. And then for repo server, one PR is open to cache errors. I hope it can be just merged. I'm just waiting for Jan to comment, because he had asked for some changes. And then there is one more PR, which kind of implements 80% of work needed, but contributor, I think he doesn't have time to continue. And we asked him in PR, and he told us, feel free to use my code and, build on top of it. That's what I guess we're going to do. And there is a third improvement in repo server. So we need, which we don't know what it is yet. So basically, there is, something have to be done in repo server to maybe clone same repository multiple times, or maybe even we have to, merge what we've built so far and see how far it moves us kind of in terms of performance improvement. Yes, and we have some smaller tasks from previous, just bug fixes. And
got it. Yeah. Okay. So in general, could we do one thing? Is it possible that, so I think when I was looking at the milestones board, I was trying to figure out which ones are in progress or not. I think one way is to look at assignees, or look at that PR symbol on the issue to understand there's some PR already. What is the easiest way to go to, let's say, a list of 50 issues and figure out which are the ones that haven't been, looked at yet?
I feel like assignee is the way to go. I really like how people, we still don't have this. I think it's in a process. We need to figure out how we're going to make everyone's members here, and then people can self-assign until it is resolved. I like that, people comment and say, oh, I want to work on it. And then if I see that comment, I just assign it explicitly. So that's the best indicator, I guess. So I would assume everything without assignee is not being worked on. And then,
but then you wouldn't be able to assign somebody an issue unless that person is part of the Argo project, right?
We can assign it to anyone, but members,
that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but we can.
Okay.
Allow us to assign ticket to anyone.
Right. Then I think that's fine. As long as you can assign something to someone, irrespective of project membership, that is a good indication. Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
I think maybe better, Shavik. Like, do you know when are we going to make it self-service? Do you know if?
Yeah, we were discussing that in the other group. I think in general, So I think from a governance perspective, I think the proposal about memberships, I think that is almost about to go in. I think in a couple of, I think in the next couple of Bootstrap committee meetings, we should be able to agree on that let's implement that for Argo CD, Argo workflows, rollouts and events. I think in general, the only thing we had to agree on as a group is what defines a membership, etc. I think, but like you said, in this case, we don't even need that. So yeah. So I think, sorry, Alex, is your question on
Oh
when
yeah,
can?
I just wanted. I feel like you just know better. You know how far away from that. Yeah. So,
Oh yeah. So I think in general, what you're doing right now is great. Like I said, you just keep assigning folks,
Mhm.
and I think to, just for this group, since not everybody's looped into that conversation, the general understanding was that we want to have more people become project members than they can assign things to themselves. And the typical way to do that is if you make a simple contribution or a couple of contributions, then the project maintainer can go in and add that person in as a member with some general consensus between the
yeah,
maintainers, and that should
so
work. So
Yeah, I thought once we flush out the membership guidelines, I thought it
Yeah.
would be a good practice to
yes,
use that formal process as part of bringing in the Red Hat folks and stuff.
yeah, I think I mean
bet-
from my perspective, I'm in no hurry as long as you can assign somebody. I think
Okay.
that should be good.
Mhm.
Okay, I think that's it from me. I think the only thing which I wanted from this discussion is that if we could take a look at 1.8 and ensure all the assignees are updated, that'll be easier.
Okay. Oh, one
to get
thing,
in.
like generally we won't get to everything that is targeted for that release, and so towards the
Fair
end,
enough.
when we feel like okay, I think it's enough, then we'll draw a line and say okay.
Right. I mean, I think it makes sense. I mean, the theme of the specific milestone should be accomplished.
Yeah.
If it's accomplished, everything else should go out because then it lets you do a release and get feedback on it. Till you do that, you can't get feedback on it. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And then we still keep getting a lot of contributions, which from people who just want to contribute. They don't much care about what they can contribute. And if if the contribution is good, we want to accept it, and that usually it might affect the timeline. Yeah.
Right, because then the reviewer maintainer time goes into looking at an issue that wasn't necessarily part of the milestone.
Right.
Yeah. And that it happened in 1.7 release because 1.7 was mostly bug fixes. So we were fixing bugs and at the same time, we've got several big features. And at some point we realized, okay, we fixed a number of bugs and we have several good features. Let's just push it out and continue,
I think that's fine as long as as long as we communicate to a contributor that this looks like a feature that needs to be taken a look at after a lot of bugs go in. That's totally fine, I think. Yeah. Okay, sounds good. I think any other topics that we would like to talk about?
One topic, like, is it possible to, because we have this meeting always, every week, it's good to get list of. I guess I'm asking everyone who could participate in the meeting. Please ask your question ahead of time, and then maybe we'll have agenda for ahead of time, because honestly we almost talked about everything we could talk about in Argo CD. I guess we have one more area which is not yet covered, the UI, and after that it's almost going to be like office hours. We just ran out of material.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. So I think what you're saying, I think number one, we should as a group ensure that we add things to the agenda which we want to talk about. So for example, Jaideep, and I'm not picking on you, I just have that example right in front of me. So if there's a topics you want to bring up, I think put it on the agenda. That lets people know that there's something that's going to be discussed and people should show up for that. That'll be nice, I think. And then there's the UI piece that can be added to the agenda in general. And I think after that, we could consider making this once in 2 weeks meeting instead of a weekly meeting.
Depends on number of questions.
Yeah. I mean,
ideally, maybe we could take everything offline because meeting is like so many people in.
Right.
The other consideration is that we do have like more than one project, like CD, where I could do stuff on rollouts. Alex could do stuff on workflows, and just kind of start spreading the topics across the different projects.
Right. So what you're saying is what we could then do is that I think in a couple of in a couple of office hour meetings, we would have talked enough about Argo CD to have enough topics to talk about every week. We should probably have, let's say, a workflows meeting, like a workflows and events meeting, and a CDN rollouts meeting alternatively. That'll at least give us, let's say, folks contributing on events and workflows at least a couple of weeks to grasp and show up with more questions and topics for the next one. Yeah, I think that sounds good. Does that sound good for you, Alex Collins?
Yes, please.
Awesome. I think that sounds good then.
Also,
do you wanna-
one more suggestion is that if I don't know if Slack's the best or if there's a Google Doc or something, but similar to the community meeting, maybe if there's kind of throughout the week, if people have things they want to bring up, if they were to put that on the agenda, we could make sure the appropriate people are there to help them with the thing.
We had this issue which Shobik created. Are you saying we should convert it into Google Doc and then just live kind of a logo for the meetings?
I would suggest that. I think Google Doc is more fluid and easier to update.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I was waiting for someone to propose it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I can convert that issue into the document. So there will be some links with recordings, and it's
Right, and I think before we end the call, I think one thing which I wanted to check from the maintainers, Alex and Jesse, I think what I wanted from the Red Hat side of things is that we wanted folks to get warmed up with contributing to Argo CD. And now that has happened already. I think folks have made enough contributions to get warmed up with the contribution experience. Are there any strategic, I mean, not any, I'm sure there are, but then now we should probably look into picking up strategic areas that you think you could hand off to somebody and ask that person to work on. That could be me, or that could be somebody else on the team as well. Instead of the usual, let's pick any random thing and work on. We could gradually start doing that, just so that some of the load that you, Alex, and Jesse, you have on release critical things, that also get shared. It shouldn't be just that the Red Hat folks go and pick up something that is super easy to work on. Like, that's fine to begin with, but
actually, I was wondering if there was any kind of themes that would motivate you. Like, I don't know if OpenShift themes or something like making ROC 100% compatible with OpenShift. And generally, I feel like there would be things that are important to us, there's things important to you, and it makes sense for the things that are important to either of us to pick up those things and make sure it's what they want. Like for us right now, we have a scalability thing, and so we're kind of eager to focus on scaling it so that it works in our environment. Whereas we don't necessarily, for example, we had sync windows, which Jan wrote, but we don't currently not really taking advantage of that feature, although his organization is. So that's kind of what I mean by priorities for the different organizations. So if there's something, a theme or something that Red Hat would like to focus on, that's kind of what I suggest to pick up issues around that area.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. I think there will be actually themes, to be precise, and I'll just tell you why. For example, right now I'm focusing a lot on figuring out how to ensure Argo CD is serviceable for customers. So just to give you an idea, like Red Hat doesn't support anything for a customer unless it's been installed by a Red Hat operator. Okay. I know you've heard that many times, right? So, and now we're trying to get the operator to install Argo CD. There are these different scenarios that we have for our customers in general, is that we have something called OpenShift dedicated, that's like managed AKS or managed Google Cloud, where a user doesn't have cluster admin. Like you can't do anything that can potentially burn down the cluster, but you can do everything else. That usually maps to that you cannot do cluster scope things. You can only do namespace scope things. Yeah. So from the operator perspective, you try to support that model, and I'm trying to figure out these questions like, if I'm whitelisting specific things on the resources side in config, how do I ensure that gets mapped into real RBAC? Because else it just wouldn't, like a
Mhm.
platform, I mean, for example, the OpenShift dedicated platform wouldn't even accept an operator if that does way too many things into the cluster scope thing in some cases, right? So I'm personally, and with a couple of other folks here, looking at the serviceability aspect, that
Mhm.
how does the operator manage specific namespaces only, and I could write role bindings to do it right now. We just have to figure out how somebody can say, I want only these 10 namespaces managed using Argo CD, and the service account should only be able to do that. It shouldn't have anything beyond that. So that's one area, and I think my contribution there, you should see shortly, would be I would like to add some documentation in general about how users should be able to do that themselves, because right now the documentation is pretty open. It's a pretty cluster admin thing right now you have in there.
Mhm.
If you think about that. So I think that's something that I'm looking at. So if there's something from a serviceability aspect you have, I would like to really know what that is, because I'm probably missing that while I'm only looking at the RBAC side of things. So that's one area for sure we would want to take a look at. Some of the other things is that how do we make Argo CD work great in a disconnected environment? And I think some of those would also map to, let's say, branding, etc. Because let's say if you can change a specific asset easily, then that asset is probably going to be applicable in a disconnected environment as well. So those are a couple of themes that, like from a shipping as a vendor perspective that we are looking at, they might come up with issues in upstream, but if you already know there are things that have to be taken a look at, that would be great.
Like almost everything you listed, it's already been worked on a little bit. The namespace support, we added it, but you're right, it's not documented anywhere because it was kind of implemented in GitOps engine to be, frankly, compatible with Flux, because the idea of GitOps engine was to power Flux. So we implemented the code change and kind of didn't tell about it to anyone.
Okay.
It's available in Argo CD, and recently we realized that people actually started using it and they're finding bugs. So few bugs were fixed, and the biggest, I guess, caveat right now is it's like a hidden feature. No one knows about that. But it's possible to just tell to Argo CD, here is my cluster. I want to manage 5 namespaces in that cluster. So it's just, but it's
right. So I think I'm kind of like my entry into that was a little even more low level into that, which means that like the service account today, I mean, I think those checks are being done on an Argo CD side. But I think the service account today has to be able to watch and deploy things in all namespaces cluster scoped as well. But on an Argo CD level, you can control that, right? Is that what you're saying?
yes, you can
Yeah.
tell to Argo CD, don't even try cluster level resources. And we even have CLI automation to create the service account, which has only namespace level. Basically, the CLI which we use to create to connect cluster, it auto creates service account, and by default creates like a God level service account. If you specify a list of namespaces, it will create one service account for each namespace with namespace level permissions in those namespaces only.
Got it. Yeah, I think that does sound very good. So I think
like we had ideas from.
I need to discover that then. Yeah, that's something I'm just looking at.
From people requested in personal messages some way to improve it. Basically, they're saying it's nice CLI can do it for me. Can you help me to do it declaratively? Like basically, maybe the CLI can output YAML, but don't make any changes in the clusters. But those things, because we don't have energy to drive that, we don't even have tickets for these improvements. Basically, what I'm saying, if you you can eventually will maybe create
it makes sense.
and then request them to be in milestone then.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm going to create some issues upstream. So I think what I've been typically doing is that, so I had Argo CD running on a specific namespace, and I could lock it down to only deploy on that namespace, and then I could additionally create a role binding in another namespace and ensure that the application controller could deploy to that namespace, and then like that I could add n number of namespaces if needed. So I think I figured that out, but then I realized it does need documentation of the tooling which you're talking about. So that's good to know that some of it is there already. Yeah. Okay.
So the current situation is, I think code is there, and
Yeah.
even been, people already tried it, and then we discovered a couple bugs, and we even Red Hat, I forgot who exactly from Red Hat,
John
the
McKenzie.
bugs related to this particular feature.
Yeah, and I think the one other thing which I'd like to address upstream is that I think I've been hearing this from a lot of folks, and I know it's because of the lack of understanding while using in general, is that they say that, Argo CD, gets itself God mode powers on the cluster. And I tell them, well, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't have to be God mode permissions on the cluster. And I think that's an area of documentation which in the upcoming weeks, I would like to improve in general, so that upstream, like, people should not have that idea, like that you can make it God mode, but you can choose from a service account perspective what not to do and what to do. I think that's something I'd like to improve on. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember we had that feedback already, and we tried to improve it, but I guess, it's just not enough. So
Sure. Yeah, I can help in that respect. And I think, yes, I think for the other folks also in general, if you want to pick up specific areas, you can just speak up. Like, you don't have to speak to me first and then here. I mean, in general, it's fine if we address different areas of Argo CD irrespective of OpenShift. That's totally fine. Just letting the Red Hatters know on the call.
I'm kind of encouraging that. So I feel like we identified that it's really easy to work on, opinionated features for Argo CD by creating this Argo project in Argo Labs. And we have already several projects. Like, one is, image updater, Argo notifications application set. And I'm sure there are, like, tons of possible other projects. And it's basically, we just never had time to log them, but we can, if someone interested, we can brainstorm together. And I feel like it's just easier to do it this way, because in this case, you kind of own this whole project. You don't have, and you have the most knowledge. And I think this is, maybe JC can correct me, but that's the way we want to go. We want to, keep Argo CD easy to integrate with, and it has to be focused on, just thinking. And then, for example, what if you want to create like preview applications? This is kind of one of the very attractive use cases, where you create a simple application using Argo CD for every pull request. And that's really hard to kind of embed into Argo CD, because it's super opinionated. You have to pick either GitHub or GitLab, or kind of support both GitHub and GitLab. But if you build it as a if you build it as a Argo Labs, it can be as opinionated as needed, and you can get feedback from users quickly. And it's super valuable, because this way you kind of, enable a whole new use case.
Yeah, in general, I'm always concerned with just the software bloat of Argo CD. And so we always, the pattern we try to encourage is kind of more loosely coupled. So right now, like Argo notifications is actually a great example. We internally, when we were starting that, we had considered putting notification support directly into Argo CD. But we felt like it was maybe too much, so we decided to put it as a side project, and maybe one day, notification is something first class. App sets is kind of like that same approach. We put app sets as a separate project. Although with app sets, we kind of want that to eventually get into Argo CD, but for now, it's actually a separate project. Part of that is to kind of improve velocity of the development of that, and not have it bogged down by the development of Argo CD.
I think that makes sense, I would say. Yeah. In general, that makes it easier for different vendors to adopt it also without having to commit it to the entire thing. So
yeah, image pusher is another example. So that was the very, very common request is like, we like for like a Docker push our CI/CD is such that we end with pushing an image, and then we would like that act to somehow get deployed through GitOps. And then so Jan implemented that other controller or the other service that basically notices that push event and then commits that into the Git so that Argo CD is none the wiser. It's just like a normal GitOps flow. So yeah, that's kind of how like my philosophy on how these things are more like loosely coupled, and sometimes it makes sense to go into core. Other times we feel like it's better for looser coupling.
Yes, if there's something that's an improvement on an existing feature, etc., on an existing capability, awesome. But otherwise, it's a lapse. Alex, go ahead. Yeah.
Collins had one thing to mention.
So I've got to drop off.
Yeah.
And Hong does as well. I think.
Yes.
Yes. Just, I forgot to mention this earlier. In terms of people, if they want to get involved in kind of code contributions for workflows and events, one thing we're kind of really looking for is people to help out with designing the new Argo events user interface. And if that's something you're interested in getting involved with, that would be great, and you can DM me on that.
Nice.
I think it's going to be really cool. That's what I think. I think it's going to be a really cool project. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you,
Also,
Alex.
looks like we're a little bit over, so I think it's probably a good time to stop.
There was can I quickly answer? There was a question from Reddy. He's asking, is it a good time? I guess, is that meeting a good time to discuss enhancement proposals, or is it better to do it offline? I feel like both is good. We can do it offline, and then if because of like time we could not answer offline, then this meeting is good to bring it up.
Yeah, I agree. I think this would be a great forum to discuss things more in depth and stuff and else. But if you can't wait until next Thursday or something to get a hold of us, then by all means, reach out directly, and then we can even set up ad hoc Zooms when we need to get into it. So.
Yep, having it on the GitHub issue first would be nice, because then people can prep for the meeting and have a more in-depth discussion. So, JD,
yeah, we could start thinking about it, and yeah. Okay, I think we
awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jesse. Any final notes, Alex, or are we good? Awesome.
Only one note was like you mentioned easy tickets. I noticed that the tickets are not that easy already. Like we did get PRs which fixes things which are not easy to fix.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, there are no easy tickets for sure. I mean, if it's easy, it wouldn't lie around for long. It would be picked up by somebody.
So basically, I'm saying thank you. It's like we've got a lot of great contributions, and I feel like we could do a better job reviewing, but we will improve it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.